Hey, I'm glad you're here. You are eavesdropping on my conversations with everyday adults about how they coped with the tough stuff and how they got from bad to better. I am Brandy Menifee, and these are coping stories. Today is part two of my candid conversation with Scott about coping after his home burned in a wildfire back in 2018. In part one of my conversation with him, Scott shared what coping in the aftermath of the Woolsey Fire looked like and felt like for him. You're about to listen to part two of our conversation, and this is really for anyone who's been impacted by any wildfire, but particularly the wildfires that ravaged Los Angeles in January 2025. Palisades, Eaton, Hughes, Sunset, Kenneth fires. We recorded this conversation a week after those wildfires ignited terror throughout Southern California. And Scott was willing to share his to do list, his fire survivor action plan, to help you or anyone you know navigate insurance, debris removal, housing, grants, loans, getting your mail, deciding if you should rebuild or not. There's a lot of valuable information in this episode, and you can take notes, but you don't have to take notes. You could just scan the QR code to download Scott's actual checklist. He will review this checklist in this episode, plus offer all kinds of practical and logistical advice for anyone experiencing fire loss. Your to-do list must have been overwhelming.
Yeah, it was. It was.
What helpful logistical advice would you give to people who are going through fire loss right now?
I mean, there's so much. I
Oh,
guess yeah, that's difficult. I don't know if some people might be listening that are going through the current fires, possibly. Everybody's being contacted probably right now by tons of different law firms. You got to be very careful. There's a lot of predatory people out there, like even with just as simple as debris removal. There's a lot of predatory debris removal people that'll try to take advantage of victims and say, hey, your insurance company will pay for this, but we'll do it. We're a private company. No, you don't. The insurance company will pay for your legal fees if you do this. You got to make sure you check that all with your insurance company. A couple of people I know in my area got kind of scammed by debris removal people. They came in and said, "Well, listen, we're gonna get you ahead of the game here. We're a private company. We'll come in and we'll remove all the debris from your home." Well, they did, but the insurance didn't cover it. It has to be done in a certain way. It has to be disposed of in a certain way. In order for them to clear your home to even start to rebuild, there's so many different county processes, and they're very frustrating to navigate. But if they aren't done, you can't really hurry up the process. I guess is what I'm saying. And some people are going to try to trick you into believing you can hurry it up. If they are and they're helping you, that's great. But you got to make sure that everything's going the way the insurance companies in the county want it to go. Otherwise, you're going to end up being in a bad place down the road.
that is really, really helpful to know.
Insurance is a complicated thing. Call all the insurances you think may be involved. Your home insurance, you call them right away. Any business insurance, any auto insurance. If you have AAA, they may give you money to get a rent a car in this situation if your insurance doesn't cover it. There's a lot of stuff to get into when it comes to insurance. That's a super long conversation in itself. However, I will say one thing real basic is, from my perspective, you want the insurance company to deem you a total loss. It's a little bit like, a car. Did you total your car, or are we going to take it to the body shop and try to kind of half-ass fix it? That's kind of my situation. At first, I was a total loss, but then I was like, well, because my garage was still there. So the total loss, especially in a disaster like this, typically insurance companies will write you, and it depends on the insurance company, but they will write you just whatever the value of your home was, they'll write you a check for 2 to 4 times the value because they know that everything's going to be so much more expensive to build. It's not like a single home getting a kitchen fire and burning, right? You have a situation, especially these current fires, where you have contractors, supplies, everything that's going to be far more expensive and take far longer than it would in an individual home fire. They'll usually, just to get things off their plate, they'll usually write a pretty big check, at least for the loss. Now, as far as the contents and all that stuff, that's a whole different thing. There's all these different parts of the policy, but that's probably the best case scenario, especially in all most of these homes are going to be like that. It's not good to be a partial loss. The insurance company is much more difficult to deal with in that case. The good news is I did hear, and I think it's unprecedented, that FEMA is going to cover 100% the cost of this fire, whatever that means. And I don't think that has ever happened before that I'm aware of. So hopefully people that are underinsured or don't have insurance or things like that, as long as our incoming administration doesn't change that, will be able to get the help they need financially. Because the last thing you need is you're going through the emotional and psychological stuff isn't going to, you got to work on that yourself, and that's going to be there. But the last thing you need is also getting an extreme hit financially in these kind of situations. You want to make sure you just navigate that the best you possibly can. Just make sure that you get the maximum amount you can from all the different entities that you deserve to get it from. This is also super important with insurance. You can ask for another adjuster. You are not stuck with the adjuster they give you. If you don't like that person and you feel like they're not helping you, or you just don't like they rub you the wrong way, they don't seem sensitive enough to your situation, ask for another adjuster. Obviously, you're going to want to find a place to stay the best you can. I was really lucky and I got a rental home, a furnished one. That's a whole other saga in itself on how to deal with people trying to get you into homes, because you're supposed to be, just so people know out there, they need to put you in a quote like dwelling. And a lot of people, I was talking to somebody from Oklahoma who didn't understand California at all, and then eventually they kicked me to a third party company called ALE, and they were great. They were the ones that were able to find me the home. They totally got it. I had the best success when I was running up against problems with my insurance company. I was a squeaky wheel. I kept, no, this is not the accommodations that you guys promised me. And they eventually just got tired. Oh, they'll also do this. They'll try to flat fee buy you out. That'll be really tempting. Please do not do that. So sometimes the insurance companies will come in and they'll do the math in their head and they'll go, okay, let's say $3K, $5K a month for this. And we'll plot times that out times 24. And we'll say that we'll give this guy a blank check for this amount of money. And that might seem tempting to them, and maybe we can get this over with. Don't do it, because everything's going to cost so much more than you could possibly expect for rent right now. And they owe it. Now, some of you might have it capped to where you can only spend a certain amount, and you'll have to calculate over time what you can afford. Unfortunately, some people have a cap in their policy where there will be only a certain amount allowed. Usually there's 24 months that you get. Okay, so they're gonna pay for you to be 24 months. Now, in this disaster, I have a feeling it'll go at least 3 years, that the insurance companies will be forced to pay for somebody's rent if they're going to rebuild. That happened even in the Woolsey Fire. They extended it by 1 year. California extended it. They're going to do it again for sure in this. So plan on that. If you have a capped amount, then you got to go, okay, how much can I spend per month? And do that math. If you don't have a capped amount, just make sure you get a like residence. That's what you're owed, no matter how much it costs the insurance company. So you feel comfortable that you're living in something. You might not be able to be in the area where your home was lost, but something that's a similar type of home and area. That's important. And if you could reach out to somebody that you know that's been through this, that could send you documents that they have that are maybe, outlines of things that they went through, or, must do to-do list kind of things, that would be helpful as well. Luckily, a friend of mine had a friend that had gone through the Thomas Fire a year before in 2017. People who have gone through this can really help you in different times. This was one of the most helpful things that happened for me, was they spoke briefly with me on the phone, and then they sent me a list of things like a list of to-do list. I have something here called, immediate necessities. Shopping. Obviously everybody out there is going to need to shop. Make sure you keep all your receipts. I know you've probably heard this before, but there's a part under your coverage, usually I think it's coverage D, where anything you need to spend money on right now, anything, is going to be covered by your insurance. But you have to have records of it. Keep every single receipt. That's really important. Utilities, you want to call all your utility companies and make sure that they freeze or suspend your service right away. That's including like newspaper delivery. You want to get a P.O. box immediately. If you haven't done it already, get a P.O. box. Because what's going to happen is they're going to start forwarding mail to the closest non-destroyed post office in your area, closest to your probably to your zip code or address. That's going to start bundling up. The post office should have that, but that's very chaotic. Even when I went in there at the size of the Woolsey Fire, it was extremely difficult to get all of my mail. So any place you can possibly set up a post office, you can always move it, but even if you have to drive out there every couple of days and get so you're getting your mail. I know people that had great credit. Their credit was affected. It was a nightmare for them because they missed a certain bill or something. And the companies unfortunately are not as reasonable as they should be. When you let them notify them that you're in this kind of situation, they don't care. You're dealing with a creditor or something. So be careful on that one. The other thing you want to keep open-minded to is take every grant you can possibly get. I got several grants, and they're gifts. And again, like being open to people helping, it's okay. Now, some of them might, if you qualify for FEMA, I didn't, but if you do, they say they might affect the amount you might get from FEMA because if you got monies from other sources, they may, but my advice would be try to get all the grants you can. I mean, like in my case, there was the local high school put together a fund for people that were victims, and they raised a certain amount of money, and they split that up amongst victims. There was the YMCA, there was the Small Business Association, there was WEC, which is a women's business association. There were different people that were willing to basically, if you qualified, give you a grant. My local high school had a grant for people that lived in the area. There's going to be a lot of grants available to you, and you want to try to find out what those are and take advantage of those. There will be loans available possibly too through the Small Business Association and other people. And also the other thing is you're going to be paying mortgage during this whole thing. It's important for you to look out because you can get forbearance, a mortgage forbearance. And you've got to call your mortgage company, and basically what they'll normally do is they'll suspend the first 3 to 4 months of the mortgage until you start getting insurance monies coming in. So they'll say, okay, you don't have to pay for January, February, March, and maybe even April. You don't have to pay, and we'll either you give us a lump sum for that amount once insurance monies start paying, or they'll stack it at the end of your loan, which is more ideal. Some banks are even going to possibly get you a reduction in your payments, or maybe forgive those payments entirely. So that's important to check into because you got to remember, and that was one of the things that also influenced me in my decision to not rebuild was, okay, how much money am I going to save by not paying my mortgage during this whole rebuilding process? The hardest thing that I had to face, the hardest decision I had to make was whether I was going to rebuild my home or not. I believe it was roughly a year after the fire that I made the decision I was not going to.
What led you to that decision?
Going on the partial versus total loss thing, I really felt like I'd be putting my family in financial jeopardy to try to rebuild my home. I didn't feel the finances were there to do it right. And even though with my specific case, I got the foundation cleared by the county, I could have built it as a remodel instead of which is much easier permitting wise, because you can build it on the same footprint. Because if you have one wall standing, you can permit it as a remodel instead of a total, rebuild. So that's advantageous. That part is really advantageous for rebuilding. However, because the insurance company doesn't give you as much money, it's difficult. And then I just had to kind of do the math in my head. Okay, so everything's going to be 2 to 4 times more expensive than I think it's going to be. And I had talked to contractors and I had talked to, architects and everything. And I was in the process of doing it. I had intended to do it. But when I saw the numbers and was thinking about it, I was like, I don't think this makes any sense. And, I had no idea COVID was coming. But in retrospect, it was really a good decision. There's no way I would have been able to afford to rebuild the home. And so what I did was I sold it to a contractor that a realtor friend of mine knew about in Calabasas, and they had, of course, all the resources to do it. So that was the hardest decision, and I had to make sure my kids were on board with that because that was really, really tough. Also, it was an emotional decision, psychological decision, in that I knew that my neighborhood was going to be a construction zone for years, that it would take years and years for what I loved about the area I lived in
Mm.
to be this kind of the same again. It is just now kind of starting to get that way 6 years later, but there's 3 homes right around my home that still are completely haven't even started construction, haven't even begun. I don't know if they're tied up in what the reason is but that and I will say that to people out there is it's not something to think about right now. It's too huge of a decision to think about right now, but you don't absolutely have to go back to that home. You know, Try to define what home is for yourself, what that means, and what the healthiest and best thing for yourself and your family is. Because that was a lot of the decision for me too. The finances were big. I didn't think I would mentally go through the process of going back there day after day after day during the building process and look at, and just it just was too much for me to think about. So I decided, I had a great rental property for 2 years, and then I sold the house, and I decided, I'm going to try to start over again, and that's what I did. I just ended up buying another home, and my kids love it here. That was my biggest thing that I had to get over is, are my kids going to like not hold it against me, but be how is this going to affect them? Currently, where I live, one of the things just to relieve my own stress, I have solar panels and a battery backup. When I was looking for new homes, eventually, I said, I have to said to my realtor, I have to have a house that already has a solar system installed, and then I installed a battery unit as soon as I could, because it's not only a convenience issue, it's potentially a safety issue. We had no alerts. There were no like alerts going off on cell phones or anything like that. The other thing is contents. There's debris removal involved in that. There's supplemental buildings. If you have an exterior structure, that's a whole nother thing. If you have anything left in your home, there's cleaning. In my case, Service Masters was a company that did some of the items because I did have some items in my garage that needed to be dealt with. If you have photos and receipts, that's going to help you immensely. I would say to anybody out there, if you haven't had this happen to you, make sure you take photos of everything in your home. Make sure that you document what those things are, possibly the cost, and, have that on a hard drive. So when you leave, because they will compensate you for your contents, but you have to prove you had them. So I hope a lot of people out there have photos or receipts for the contents of their home. I was really lucky, though, far luckier than some people, in that I got my hard drives, which was a priority for me because I do family films every year for my kids since they were first born. And I video everything that goes on through the year, and I cut it together for like a 2-hour movie for them to have. And I'm kind of an archivist, digital archivist, so I had scanned all my analog photos, all that stuff. So that was huge for me, that I was able to walk away with that kind of treasure trove on a small drive. And I recommend it for everybody to do that, because if you can condense a lot of analog things onto a digital drives, and you can grab those pretty quickly, and you still have those memories. Getting lodging, if you don't have a home, isn't easy. So I knew that my girlfriend and her daughter were taken care of. My kids and their mom were taken care of. They were going to be okay. I just had to worry about myself. And so I did. I luckily got a room at the Residence Inn, and it was beneficial on many, many levels. One was that I had a place to stay. It was functioning. It gave me a base of operation. It was really good for me because it was kind of a fire central. Like there were, victims of the fire there to varying degrees, people that just couldn't go back because of the smoke, or they couldn't go back because of the evacuations, or they had lost their home like I had. And there was also a bunch of insurance adjusters there from various insurance companies. There were firefighters coming out from outside the area that were helping fight the fire, staying at the same place. And so every night, the the Residence Inn put on a kind of a free buffet kind of thing where everybody could gather and exchange information about things, and it became this like community that was incredible, that was invaluable to me. There were so many things I learned about like there that I wouldn't have found out about otherwise. Even like pop-up places where, FEMA might be and the county might be and things like that were going on. Because it was a myriad of different people and disciplines, you were hearing things from all these different perspectives too. And so it was really beneficial for me to be there at that time.
Sounds incredible.
One of the most helpful things for me was the pop-up spot. So in your area, there will be places where you can go that will be these, lack of a better term, pop-up places where they'll have a representative from every possible entity that you will probably want to talk to there. They'll have somebody from the Small Business Association. They'll have somebody from various grants that you might be able to qualify for. They'll have somebody from FEMA there. They'll have a FEMA tent. They'll have an LA County tent. Those are incredibly important to attend. There will also be community gatherings, and there will be people putting on, places where people can come and talk and grieve, but also get information. Those exist. Try to find out where those are. Those will give you the information you're going to need to try to navigate through this. Those were really, really important to me in the same way that, I was lucky to stay at the Residence Inn and I was having access to that information. The Red Cross will also be at those pop-ups. So, you're going to want to talk to them and see what kind of relief from them and FEMA that you can get. You're going to want to have to replace any, legal documents. If you lost your passport, hopefully you were able to grab that before you left, but any of your legal documents, there will be places at those pop-ups as well that can help direct you towards the services that can help you replace those documents. It's a full-time job. When you're a victim, they've got a full-time job right now. They're not going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to focus on anything else. Victims shouldn't have to advocate for themselves, but it's the way it is. So, you might want to hire an attorney. I don't know if your insurance will pay for it. If they will, great. If you want to pay out of pocket, great. If you feel that's important for you, I think it is important to know legally what insurance companies can and can't do. I did have that advice, and mine was free, contingent on the fact that I was going to let that person represent me in what he thought was going to be a lawsuit against the power company, which he felt started Woolsey Fire. So also be careful, because there will be attorneys reaching out to you to try to get you to represent them, and you want to make sure they're vetted, or that you go with somebody that you know or somebody else knows, which is what I did in my case. I had called an attorney I knew, and he recommended an attorney that had been through himself the Thomas fires. And he told me, listen, I'll represent you for free with your insurance company if you have questions, if you want me to talk to them, if you want. So that was really helpful. Ask for help. Make a to-do list and delegate. Don't do this all on your own. You can't do this all by yourself. That's important. Listen, you got to delegate. People are going to want to help you. Friends are going to want to help you. They might be texting you, calling you already. It's too overwhelming to respond to them right now. I understand. But down the road, when things start to settle, especially when you have a place to stay, you are going to want to reach out to these people that love you, and you're going to want to give them a job. It's something that they would be able to help you with. Please do that. Do not do this all by yourself. You have people that want to help you. You need to delegate these things and all these to-do lists. You can have somebody that's working on one thing while you're working on another and help you out. That's really, really important. And there's going to be a lot of positive things to this, some gifts that you can't expect yet. I know that's not going to be easy to accept right now, but you're going to find that eventually. And to anybody who's going through this right now, I just want to send out love and hugs. And I I'm so sorry.
I really appreciate Scott sharing his fire survivor action plan. Scan the QR code to get access to Scott's actual checklist, the document with all the actionable steps he mentions in this episode. We are sending so much love to anyone listening who is experiencing fire loss in California or elsewhere. I'm really glad you stuck around. Thanks for listening to Coping Stories. Please click the follow button and leave an awesome review and share this episode to help this podcast reach the people who need to hear it most. And one last thing. If you're looking to hire someone to facilitate conversations about sensitive subject matter, or you need to hire a trauma interviewer, or you're interested in becoming my memoir client, or you want to share about a challenging chapter in your life and how you coped, either for this podcast or for my written mental health storytelling series, find me on Instagram at Mental Health Storyteller, or contact me through my website, prostorytellers.com. And of course, there's always LinkedIn.